Hi, I'm Frank Anderson. I am a professor in the zoology program and the School of Biological Sciences here at SIU. I grew up in northern Michigan, about here, and I did my bachelor's degree at the University of Michigan, where I took two life-changing courses. One was invertebrate zoology, where even as a biology major, I was stunned to learn about major animal groups that I had never heard of. This actually kind of offended me at the time, and I felt it was my mission to teach people about these animals and to learn more about them myself. The other course was called systematics, which is basically the study of the biological relationships and classification of organisms. And for my PhD, I wanted to put together those two interests, and I wanted to go where invertebrate diversity was greatest, so I had to go to the ocean. So I did my PhD studying squid systematics at the University of California at Santa Cruz. It's hard to summarize my lab's interests because we are broadly interested in invertebrate evolution, genetics, and ecology. There's kind of a joke in invertebrate zoology circles about, do you study squishies or crunchies? My main interests are in cephalopod mollusks, things like these cuttlefish, land snails, like this, and freshwater and terrestrial annelids. Those are soft-bodied things. Those are the squishies. This is Alatuthis, a group of 3 species of eastern Atlantic squid that are of some fisheries interest. And we did a study to use genetic and morphological data to distinguish those 3 species, and learned that one aspect of the tentacular club was quite useful for distinguishing 2 of the most important European species. I've also had students study cave crustaceans, beetles, mayflies, things like that. Those are the crunchies, things with exoskeletons. For my own personal research, I do a lot of bioinformatics work, so that means I spend a lot of time sitting at a computer looking at DNA sequences. My students work on cephalopods, freshwater annelids, freshwater snails, and terrestrial snails, and they do a lot of field work and lab work. And the amount of field work and lab work they do really depends on what their research question is. We have a lot of basic equipment that you would typically see in a biology lab, like microscopes that my students use to sort specimens and to ID specimens. Typically, they will do genetic work. So we have equipment to do DNA extractions, PCR amplification of genes of interest, gel electrophoresis, DNA sequencing. And once we get those data back, my students will typically use them to study evolutionary relationships among populations or among species. So they'll reconstruct phylogenies. My students work at a range of taxonomic levels, and at the lowest taxonomic level, you can use a phylogeny to ask a very obvious question: how many species do I have? Looking at deeper levels, you can use phylogenies to study the evolution of morphological traits over deep time. You can figure out when major groups of animals split apart from each other, and maybe even hypothesize reasons why those splits may have occurred. Recently, one of my students has been studying the invasion of freshwater habitats by annelids. There is evidence of a burst of gene duplication in key osmoregulatory genes correlated with the invasion of freshwater habitats from marine habitats by annelids. I've been lucky enough to do some work on earthworms recently. Most people don't realize this, but earthworms are about as diverse and about as old as mammals, the group that we're members of. One thing that we have found in our research is that there are 2 major groups of annelids, or earthworms, one in the northern hemisphere, one in the southern hemisphere. We can date when that divergence occurred, and it occurred somewhere between 160 and 200 million years ago, which is about the time that the northern and southern continents were splitting apart from each other, taking earthworms along for the ride. So we thought that was kind of neat. If any of this sounds interesting to you, you can check out the links below to learn more about my research, about the zoology program, or about the School of Biological Sciences.